What's going on, guys? So in this video we'll be talking about deadlifts, how to set up properly, and how to set up for the pull, and the types of difficulties that I've personally had with deadlifts. And honestly, I'm still pretty new to deadlifts. I've been deadlifting consistently for around 6 months now, and one of the main issues that I wanted to bring up is my tendency for a posterior pelvic tilt. So what this means is that my hips tend to sort of round once I get into like heavier weight. Now I've been trying to fix this issue for a few months now, and so far, I mean, I've had my fair share of like sort of kind of mild, not injuries, but like I've kind of pulled with bad technique in the past, which is something that I'm really trying to avoid currently, which is why you see me pulling very methodically, trying to work as much on engaging my lats and engaging my back and pushing my chest out as much as possible. So that's why you don't see as much explosiveness off the floor as you do in other people's deadlifts. Now, this is my second working set. The first one was with 225, and this is, I believe, with 255. Now I'm going for 3 reps here, nothing heavy at all, not super high volume. So what I'm following is the 5-3-1 program. This is actually my 5-3-1 week. And I decided this past week to take my deadlift progress step by step and not to rush anything. Because obviously I've never been a fan of sort of the grip it and rip it technique. I've tried it over the summer and it just really led to a lot of backgrounding. So if that's the case for you, really just ask yourself, is it worth it? Like, is it worth the extra speed off the ground to let your back round so much that it's going to ultimately hinder your progress in the long run? Or is it just better to set up methodically and work on it step by step to work on that mind-muscle connection? So that was an easy 3 reps, and then I think this next weight is 285. And so here I was expecting to get at least 4 to 5 reps, because my last rep PR was 275 for 12, and I really don't count that as an official rep PR anymore, which is just me saying, look, your all-time high on deadlift is a 345 1 rep PR, but is it really worth it to count that towards calculating your working sets if you can't pull it with the straight back? Probably not in the long run. You notice that I really try to pull methodically right here. I engage before and then I pull. One thing I do really need to work on is pushing my hips back as much as possible and sort of counterbalancing my weight against the bar, so that if you were to let go of the bar at any moment, you would fall backwards. Now you want to be careful not to lean too far back, because then you just lose your balance, but make sure you're really giving some sort of tension on the bar so that you can hear that sort of click. So a good analogy is that if you're pulling 135 pounds, let's say, you really want to pull with 134 pounds right before you pull, so that you can really pull the slack out of the bar. Now here you see I fail to get it off the ground because I really don't want my back to round. I'm really trying as hard as possible. Right here you see my weight sort of shifts forward, which means that my hamstrings and my lower back in particular is not developed enough, and my quads are taking the brunt of the load, which is why I could not get it off the ground. Now here is another attempt at 285 just for 1 rep to make it up, and I think this one was much cleaner, but you'll see as I come off the ground, my weight will shift forward as well. Basically, my whole posterior chain is too weak to take the brunt of the load, so it tends to shift to my quads, which are probably the strongest muscle in my lower body. So what you can do if you're in the same boat is to do some other accessories that specialize in your posterior chain. So for example, some hamstring curls would really help. If you need help in your lower back, good mornings would help. Stiff leg deadlift and Romanian deadlifts, those are just awesome for developing your posterior chain. And even something as simple as getting into the barbell row position and doing more rows frequently, because ultimately you're still in that, and those will just overall help you develop more power in your posterior chain. So this next set is just dropping back down to 225 just to work on form. So you see here, this rep I think was actually my best, most solid rep form-wise this entire workout, and this is because I really counterbalance my weight on the bar, push my hips a little bit lower, which is completely fine for me because of my proportions. My torso is kind of long in comparison to how long my lower body or my legs should be, so that's fine for me. Right there, this is also a pretty good pull as well, and you know, that proportionality thing is just something that you guys have to figure out. I'll leave a link in the description so that you guys have something to compare against, and you know, some point of reference as to how low your hips should be in comparison to your proportionalities. So basically, essentially, the general rule is the longer your legs are, the less you have to sit lower. Although the best technique is just to grab any sort of measuring tool like a ruler or a tape measure and just measure out your proportions and compare them accordingly. So in terms of the setup, which I believe is the most crucial part of the deadlift, since you're starting from the bottom, unlike something like the squat where you're starting at the top, a general rule to follow is just to hip hinge first, and then once your hands hit, you know, around your knee area, again, that's going to vary for every person's, you know, proportions. Right as your hands hit the knee area, that's when you want to bend your legs, but in general, some people just choose to ignore this step once they get accustomed to their own setup. For me, that's kind of a tedious process to have to go through, so I only do it when I'm really starting to get fatigued and I really want to just emphasize 110% on just getting form and not really, you know, caring about how many reps I get in. But here, I'm still doing all right. I'm not too fatigued. So on this rep, I take a little bit more time to set up, as you can see. But for those of you who are beginners, the whole hip hinging first and then bending your legs is a good general rule to follow. Another thing is that you kind of want the bar to be over midfoot. That's the same rule for everyone. So once the bar is over midfoot, hip hinge, and then grab the bar and bend your knees slightly forward when you push your hips down, and that is going to automatically make your shins track a little bit forward and just lightly touch the bar. And that's when you should just stop any sort of movement, and that's when you should start engaging your lats and getting ready for the pull. And I know some of you guys will wonder, Justin, like, how did you hurt your lower back or whatever? What caused this whole issue? It started in 6th grade. It's actually a funny story. I told my friends, like, so they're little like 8-foot basketball hoops, and it had just rained, and so I was like, oh yeah, I could dunk on that little 8-foot basketball hoop because, oh, you know, I have hops or whatever, which I clearly didn't have. So I dunked the basketball anyway, but since it had just rained, the rim was slippery, so my hand slipped on it, and you know what happens when you let go of the rim after a dunk, right? Your momentum carries you forward, you fall backward, and you land just boom on your back. And that's like almost 8 feet up. And I remember I didn't get a concussion or anything, but it was like just agonizing pain in my lower back, and I never got it checked out by a doctor or anything. So I guess it just kind of stuck with me, and now at this point there's nothing really I can do except to build those muscles back up again, but in a slow, methodical fashion. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully it gave you a little bit more insight as to how to set up for a deadlift and to avoid posterior pelvic tilt or any sort of lower back issue you might be having. So that basically wraps it up for today's video. Make sure to leave a comment and list any questions down below in the comment section if you have any, and like the video and subscribe as well. If you want any more tips or you have any more questions, follow my Instagram account. I'll link it in the description below, and I'll see you in the next one. Back to back like I'm on the cover of Lethal Weapon. Back to back like I'm Jordan 96, 97. Whoa.